Hey family, so this video is going to be about energy patterns that we generate in our field that allow other beings or entities around us or elementals to feed on the light that we emit. So let's get into this. So a spiritual house can be positive or negative. It's something that your mind will focus on something and start to emit a certain feeling, right? That feeling is emitted in the form of a frequency that is associated with a specific color, right? But we don't see those colors because they're not visible to the human eye. However, to these other entities and elementals, they are. Sometimes it can be demonic beings as well. So when we start to think about something, we have these chronic thoughts, and say those thoughts are negative, we would be creating negative spiritual houses or nests within our biofield, right? So let's just say there's a red spot in your biofield or your aura, and it's because you have a big field of anger. You've focused on something that makes you angry so much that that red spot is there, right? And then say you've got other colors that kind of match that. Now, any beings that match that light frequency or resonate with that frequency of anger or that color, they will come in and feed on that, right? Because you're just releasing it out there. And so when you're releasing it out there, anything that wants to can come get it. Now, when you start to hold it in your energy field, they'll come in on it as well. So spirits of anger will nest in the spots of anger in your field. And so you can have a bunch of different, say you have anger and you have vengeance and you have rage and you have fear and you have blame. Now, you could have all of those things in your field simultaneously, and these will be energy blockages. And this is when somebody is literally like in a rut, right? They're in an energetic rut. And so by doing this, starts with the mind first. But the body, the energy body and the physical body are always an expression of the mind. So by holding these patterns, creating these nests, you're essentially calling those same types of beings in. And they will eat and eat until they are full. And you may feel relief when they eat a lot of it. But then if the mind generates more of it, they'll eat more of it. Now, what if your mind doesn't generate more of it? These beings that have created a home in your field will trigger you to think thoughts because they're hungry. It's very much like a cat coming to you or a dog coming to you to let you know that they're hungry. And when this happens, you may not even know that it's not your energy. You may not know that it's not your thought, So these beings can communicate with you telepathically through suggestion. And then you think the thought, then you generate the feeling, and that feeling releases the energy, the distorted pattern of light, or negative psychic energy is another way of putting it. And that being feeds. It's very simple. They basically use you as a food source, and they're essentially farming negative psychic energy. So we can get stuck in these patterns because these different elementals and entities will feed on us, like I said, but then we can also generate positive ones. So let's say you have a lot of love in your field, and you have these beautiful colors of like relaxation and joy and peace and love and compassion and goodwill. Well, the same thing is true for that. So then those beings will come and feed on that and immerse themselves in that. And you're emitting it all the time. They're not taking it from you. You're releasing it out there, very much like your breath. You're exhaling. It's like that. So when you're putting that out there and you're releasing it and they come in and they eat it up, and then if they get hungry, they can trigger really beautiful thoughts. So it can be a very symbiotic or it can be a very detrimental relationship that we have with these beings. So because we're constantly emitting light, we want to be very careful about what type of light we are emitting. So our thoughts trigger feelings. And the entities and elementals can trigger thoughts to trigger feelings, right? So this is how we have to be very mindful and aware of what we entertain with our minds. So if we entertain beautiful, loving thoughts toward others, that goes out and it comes back and it brings with it more energy, right? So positive or negative, it does the same thing. So if you're hating on somebody, you're releasing negative psychic energies, and then that loops back around to you. It feeds all these beings, and then they trigger you to think more negative thoughts. If you're putting out love, that unconditional love, that rose gold that we talk about, that goes out, and then that also comes back around and brings with it all kinds of amazingness. And so what do you do when you're upset and you recognize, okay, I'm holding distorted patterns of light. My point of creation right now is negative, which means it's going to come back to me, drop into the heart and shift it into that rose gold, and just imagine, what would it be like if I felt unconditional love? What would it feel like if I felt forgiveness toward this person right now? Who would I be without this negative energy? That's a really good question to ask yourself. Everything starts in the mind. So when we get our mind under control, and I'm not saying you're going to control every thought, because you'll lose control if you try to control every thought. If you start having negative thoughts, step back and observe them from a neutral point, right? So if you have a negative thought and it triggers something negative, you could say, that was a really interesting thought. You don't have to control it, you just have to guide it. Or if you can't guide it in that moment, observe it. That's the power. Step into the observer. So, when you're creating spiritual houses, really think, what do I want to create? What type of energies do I want to put out into my field? What do I want my field full of? The imagination is the seat of manifestation. And I say, if the masculine self and the feminine self could have a child together, it would be your imagination. And your imagination has the power of creation. So imagine what it would be like to feel good. Imagine what it would be like to have what you want. So in those moments, if there's negative thoughts coming in, imagine what it would be like if you could have a different quality of thought in that moment. So sometimes asking yourself, well, what's the answer? What's a different thought? And you can't think of one? Then you say this: if I could imagine what it would be, what would it be? And that bypasses whatever blockage was there, and you'll come up with something almost immediately. So I hope this helps you, and I wish you the very best in creating beautiful spiritual houses for wonderful experiences with entities and elementals that are constantly around us. Much love.